Hello and welcome to Round Robin. I'm your host, Robin McCormick from the City of Hampton's Marketing Department. And today we're going to talk about voting. It is a busy election season and my guest today is our Voter Registrar Terrie Kyle. Welcome, Terrie. How are you?
Hi, fine. Thank you, Robin. Thank you for having me.
No problem. This is an interesting topic, and frankly, it's been a busy year. There have been a lot of primaries, there's been a city council election, and we're working our way up to a presidential election. How do you keep up?
It's just the way of life with elections. We're used to having normally just 2 elections a year. Typically a June primary and the November election, and then in every even-numbered year we have our city council elections in May. Presidential election is a time-wearing event. We have the presidential primary, the May city council, a June primary, and then yes, the presidential. We start preparing for that actually in January of that year.
No way. Oh my gosh. Well, now you've been with the registrar's office for a while. You're pretty experienced. How long has it been?
I started as senior assistant registrar August 3rd of 1981.
Boy, that's in your brain. You've got that date like that.
And I became registrar July 1 of 1999.
So you've seen a lot of changes in voting and regulations and things like that. One of the things I know, we did a chat this week and people keep saying, if I don't vote, am I purged from the voter rolls? What is the answer to that?
The answer is no, you are not. The law was, if you did not vote at least once every 4 years, it was called a no vote purge. That was repealed by the General Assembly right around 1990.
Because I remember that when I registered too. And so I think people, my age or older, are a little concerned about that.
Yeah, no, that is not the case. Now when you register to vote anywhere in the Commonwealth of Virginia, as long as you keep your information current, a current address, you will stay registered to vote forever, whether you ever vote or not.
Okay, but if I do move, I need to call that or send that in to you, right? Or do you do that through the DMV also can pick up some of that information, can't they?
The DMV has the forms in order to do this. They cannot change it for you, and we have to have your signature in order to change your address.
Okay.
And what it does through the DMV is they just trigger another form that they send to you to complete a voter registration application to change your address. But you always need to keep a current voter registration address.
Okay, but registration is another thing that's changed over the years. I mean, I remember when I first registered, at age 18, you pretty much had to go to the registrar's office in person. And now there's a whole bunch of different ways you can get registered.
Yes, you can still come in person and register to vote in any registrar's office anywhere in the Commonwealth, and they will send it to the appropriate locality. You can also request an application through the mail. We'll mail you one, and you mail it back in. You can also go to any DMV in the Commonwealth. They have the form. They will register you to vote. Such as in Hampton, Newport News, and other localities, we co-locate. I have an office person from my staff at the DMV so that it happens instantaneously, and they can help you with other questions.
That's really handy for people, for your office to be out there in so many different places.
Yes, and it's helpful for the citizens. You can also register by what's called third-party groups. And you see them out all the time, particularly in a presidential election.
Right.
There'll be some out at Bay Days when that rolls around. I got a call yesterday, there was somebody at a housing project. And they just wanted to make sure that it was me. And I informed them, no, it's perfectly legal, but that is what's called a third-party registration.
That means typically an interest group or one of the campaigns is out signing up people that they think would be likely to vote the way they want. And sometimes it's not affiliated. It can be a League of Women Voters or somebody who just wants to register anybody who isn't registered.
That's right.
What are some of the voting issues you hear from the public? What do people have questions about?
Mostly they want to know what address we have them registered to vote in. And right now we have the big concern with voter ID. That is through the General Assembly. We're still waiting for the Department of Justice. And the voter ID law just means you have to show a form of ID. It does not necessarily have to be a photo ID. There are some instances where it must be, such as if it's your driver's license, it's a photo ID. If it is your work ID, it is your photo ID with your name.
Okay.
But you can also use your voter registration, voter
So
ID
the
card.
card that you mail me rather frequently, I might add.
Unfortunately.
Sometimes, a couple of times a year. But I can still use that even though it doesn't have my photo on it.
Correct. That's one of the approved non-photo IDs.
Okay. And some other things might be, I think a utility bill is acceptable.
A utility bill with your name and the current address. A social security card.
Oh, wow. That's is a very valid form of ID, but it doesn't have your address or your photo or anything. But, I still have mine. Okay. Well, and this was a law passed by the General Assembly. And when you say Justice Department, that's because we're a Voting Rights Act state, and they need to look at it. And if people are hearing in the news some issues in other states, there are states that passed more stringent laws, more stringent, that it has to be a photo ID. And so they may be hearing things in the news that doesn't necessarily apply to Hampton. Now, what happens in the past, if I showed up without my ID, I could sign a little form that says I'm really who I say I am. But that's going to be different this year.
Yes. Now what the voter ID law is saying is there's no such thing now as the affirmation of identity, which is the form that you would sign if you just forgot your ID. Now, if you forget your ID, you'll be allowed to vote, but it's called provisional voting. And your ballot will not, if you use the paper ballot, normally, you would have to with this.
Right.
You mark your ballot and it goes into a green envelope, a green provisional ballot envelope that you have signed and the election officials sign, and you have to put pertinent information on the front of it. That is returned to my office. You have until Friday at noon of that week to bring one of your approved IDs to my office and show that you are who you say you are. And then your ballot will be counted during the provisional vote count, which the Electoral Board does during canvass.
So really, in large measure, those votes won't be counted unless people really take that extra step of going back to your office and bringing the ID and things like that. So it's really important. I mean, every time I go to vote, I know those people. I've been voting at this precinct forever. They know me. It's a little bit of a social thing. Hi, how you doing? How are your kids? But it's a little more serious this time. I mean, you really do have to bring that ID.
Yeah, you'll have something. You'll have to bring one of the approved forms of ID, and I'm going to have a list of the IDs on my website, which is the hampton.gov/voter, and we'll have a list of the approved IDs. It's already on my website. I am going to update that to make sure that people understand. We will have that posted at my DMV. I'm going to try and get something in the newspaper, making sure that people are aware, and they are. The different groups have come to me asking, can you please come? So I've already done one group. I've spoken with them. I'm doing the League of Women Voters, I think next week, so that everybody knows you just have to take one of the approved forms, and most everyone has a form of ID. So it's really should not be a real problem.
And it is different. I mean, you do mail those cards to everyone. Now, whether I can put my hands on it on election day is always a little bit of a question, but I know I have it. It's there somewhere.
Yeah, and like I said, you can use your driver's license, you can use your voter ID card. Most people have work badges nowadays, and they wear them. Because they're going to work or just coming home from work. And your work badge is acceptable because most of them have your picture and your name, and that's acceptable.
So really, it's your younger people and maybe your older people who don't drive, don't have a work badge, who might need to think a little differently.
Yeah, their voter ID card would work. Some of the elderly, their utility bill with their name and their address would work. And like I said, the voter ID card, and you have gotten several this year. And there's going to be another one mailed out. The State Board of Elections, in compliant with this bill for the voter ID, the governor is mandating that another voter ID card be mailed, and they should be going out. I got an email, end of September, 1st of October.
That's good for people, and that's close to the election, and you can say, oh, I'm just going to stick this by the door and remember to take it with me if I need it.
Yes.
Well, what else is different about this federal election coming up? I know that congressional districts changed. The delegates' districts changed already, but a lot of people are going to find themselves in a lot of Hampton residents at least, are going to find themselves in a different congressional district when they go to the polls.
Yes, Hampton was in 3 congressional districts, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. We are now only in 2 districts, which is a great help because we had to have so many different ballot styles.
Oh gosh, yes.
So Hampton is now only in the 2nd and 3rd congressional district. And so if you were in the 1st, you will find that you have somebody different on your ballot. Also, there will be 2 constitutional amendments on the ballot, and that information is also on my website.
And we'll be distributing more information about that, as the time gets closer. But your main point here is it might take a little longer at the polls because you're not just checking the things you're aware of. You have to pay attention to what else is on the ballot that might slow people down.
Yeah, and constitutional amendments always do that.
They're long, they're complicated. We don't always
confusing.
understand them. Yeah, all that legal wording and stuff. Well, Terrie, what else do you want people to know about voting in the fall? Is there anything at the top? Let's talk about deadlines. When do people need to be registered by in order to hit that November election?
Okay, deadline for registering to vote is October 15th at 5 p.m.
Okay.
And if it's in the mail October 15th, postmarked October 15th, then it is accepted. If it is postmarked anything after that, of course it is not. And we also have absentee voting.
And this is a confusing topic because in the media you hear early voting, and in some states, I think Florida's the one that comes to my mind, you can just kind of wander in and vote at any point before Election Day. It's really not like that in Virginia.
No, it's not. North Carolina also has early voting, and since they're so close, it's a problem sometimes for Virginia residents. And we do not have early voting. Early voting is you just pop in and go vote the 2 weeks before the election just because you want to. We have what's called absentee voting, and there are 17 acceptable reasons for absentee voting in Virginia. And most people, if you have a need, we have a reason that you can is acceptable. Students away at college, those that are going to be away on business, vacation, personal business. Those that are working and you're driving to work, your work and your drive home is more than 11 hours.
Which is true. I mean, a lot of first responders work,
Yes.
Fire people work 24-hour shifts. So
Right.
it is certainly
Yes.
one of the considerations.
Yeah, the military, that's also another big absentee voting.
And not just military, you said, but their families as well, if they're deployed or somewhere else.
All dependents of students or dependents of military can vote absentee.
Now, one of the things we talked about, if I'm a student, what is the best place for me to register? If I go to, let's say, Virginia Tech in Blacksburg, but my real residence is in Hampton, where do I vote?
The good rule of thumb is, how are you being financed? If you are a dependent of your parents and they live in Hampton, you should vote.
And you come back to Hampton every summer or
right.
whatever?
You should vote from Hampton if you are dependent on people that live in Hampton. If you are going to school at Tech and you work out in Blacksburg and you are not dependent, you are self-sufficient, then yes, register there because that is now your home.
So you really go by what you think of as your home
Right.
at this point.
Right.
Which can change, of course.
Yes.
Okay. And is there a deadline for registering for absentee?
Yes. We have in-person absentee voting, and you can do that right up until the Saturday before the election. And absentee voting by mail, which we do encourage for those that are physically disabled or ill, the last day to get applications in is 1 week, the Tuesday before the election date.
Okay.
So that's, a little hard if you all of a sudden become ill, but you can always just come to the office if you're physically able to get in the car. We will come out to the car and help you so that you don't have to get into the office.
Oh, that's a wonderful customer service. And Terrie, you better tell us where your office is, because the first time I went looking for it, I was completely lost.
Yes, in 2007, we were asked to leave the courthouse because they had to do some renovations and change how they functioned in the courthouse. And it is a small building. So we are now in the Pinewood Plaza building on Commerce Drive on the 2nd floor. This fall,
And this is off Coliseum Drive.
Off Coliseum Drive.
Kind of in that, what I call the hotel
Right,
district.
we are right past the Red Roof Inn. If you're we're on Coliseum Drive between Mercury Boulevard and Pine Chapel Road. Everybody sees it when they're on the interstate.
I know, we just don't know how to get
and you
there.
just don't know how to get there, right. We'll have an office downstairs for people so they don't have to worry about the long hallway to my office or getting into the elevator. Make it a little bit easier for everybody.
Okay. What else? Is there anything I forgot to ask you?
Just make sure, if you don't know that you're registered to vote, you're not sure where your address is, you can go to the State Board of Elections website, which you can get to from mine, and there is a place where you can say, am I registered to vote? And you can look up your own registration to make sure.
Yeah, that's kind of cool. I mean, I think, a lot of people know. Okay.
Yeah, it tells you where your voting precinct is if you're unsure. But if you're ever just not sure, you're welcome to call any registrar's office in the Commonwealth. We can look up anything that's within our Commonwealth.
All right. And Terrie, why don't you give us your phone number, your direct phone number to your office?
Our number is 727-6218.
Okay. And your website is hampton.gov/vote? Voter. So people can get a lot of questions answered there if it works out. But otherwise, I'm sure you hear a lot of from people over the phone.
Yeah, we're getting a lot of phone calls. They wanted their voter ID card. Everybody wants to be ready to vote. That's the nice thing about a presidential. Everybody makes sure that they're registered to vote and everything is correct.
So if I can throw some numbers at you or get you to throw some numbers at me, how many of what percentage of the registered voters show up for a presidential election versus some of the other years? Is it a big gap?
It's a large gap. And it's not as many people vote in the presidential as you would actually think. Right now, we only have 90,000 registered to vote. That will increase by a good 12% by October the 15th.
Wow.
Yeah. And in a presidential election, we look for 70-75%. In a city council election, we get 12 to 15%. I think this year it actually was 17 because it was a mayor year, and that always brings out just a little bit more. In a primary, a typical June primary, it's sad. We try to get to 10%. Mm-hmm. So big range of difference there in what people get fired up about. Yes, and we have to do the same preparation for every election. It doesn't matter if it is a June primary with just one race or if it's a presidential. We have to do the same preparation. All the precincts are always open, and they're open from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. Mm-hmm. And if you are in line at 7 p.m., you are allowed to still vote. It doesn't mean that you got there and voting is over at 7. We have provisions of how to know who's in line so that they can still vote.
Okay, and in other states, I know there have been issues where they've run out of ballots. Has that ever happened in Hampton?
No. I'm very cautious about that, and we do not run out of ballots in Hampton. Actually, I've only heard of that happening one time in the Commonwealth. And there are provisions made to prevent that from happening. And we have we have the direct recording electronic machine, which is the touchscreen.
Right.
And that doesn't use paper ballots. So that will always be up and running. So people can always still vote on that if we're just in the process of getting ballots to that precinct.
But you're pretty confident that you're going to over-order ballots just in case.
Oh, yes. I've never run short.
Well, that's great. And Terrie, you've been doing this for a long time. That's a huge commitment to the city and to the citizens to stick with that and keep that knowledge base.
It is, but I've enjoyed it. It has been a very fun 31 years.
You started when you were 12, I might add.
Oh, well, thank you. But I was just a little bit older. In fact, it wasn't even my first job. But it's very repetitive work, but it's always different. Every election is different because every candidate is different, every office is different. Mm-hmm. So it's always very interesting, and I've loved it.
And there are deadlines, I would think it is. There's sort of this predictable rhythm where you have crazy hours at some point, and then, things are a little more calm at other times.
Yeah, it's always rough the week that the books close. Mm-hmm. And then we have to get everything into the computer system and proofed, because we can't mail out a voter card until we've checked the information to make sure that it's correct, because people make typos when they're doing data entry.
Right.
So everything is proofed before it gets to go out in the mail. So sometimes cards are a little delayed because if an error was made, then we redo it and the card goes out properly. And everybody gets their card in plenty of time. But we do have it's a busy time of year. We don't get a lot of sleep in a presidential election.
I bet.
From Labor Day past the election, our families love us. They love us because they put up with a lot. They all come in and help.
They don't see you. Oh, do they?
That's how
Okay.
they get to see us. They come in and help us.
That's great. Well, thank you for your commitment and for your service to the city. And thank you for stopping by today.
Well, thank you very much.
I appreciate it. And thank you for watching Round Robin. I appreciate that too. And I hope all of you will get out in November and express your opinions at the ballot box.